Hello, everyone. In this video, in this podcast, let us talk about file management tips. Now, when we interact with computer, when we do something with our machines, we usually end up with files, different files, and these files are nothing but the ones that we have been either creating directly or the files that are probably getting created by uh, some operation that we perform. Now we do have a lot of files that we care about, apart from the one that actually are there either from the operating system or maybe from the application that you might be using. But in this particular video, in this podcast, I thought I'll probably talk about some file naming conventions that can, in my opinion, drastically improve the way you access the information. And this is, of course, not really any standard, by the way. This is something that I think has worked for me, these file naming conventions. Now, before I talk about the file naming conventions, I just wanted to talk about few things that we all should keep in our mind. I mean, these are like different criterias. So, first of all, the very first criteria is that the files should be easy to search, and it is, of course, very obvious when you are working with computer and you are basically dealing with a lot of files, hundreds, thousands of files. You want an easy way to search, and when I say search, I'm talking about both searching based on file name and also the content within the file. The second criteria is it should have zero dependence, or at least very minimum dependence on proprietary software, and I will talk about it uh, briefly today as well. So, in my opinion, we should all try to not use softwares like Excel or Doc. I'm not really saying that you should not ever use them. I mean, if you have to, I mean, you will, but try not to use them as much as you can. And if it is your own personal file, let us say you are working on a code, or your, I mean, code is of course anyway a text file, but if you're just storing the information, try to store it in a text file. That will make a lot of difference, because you can open it from any operating system. You can open it on your mobile device if you want to. You can open it after 5 years, after 10 years, after 20 years, because you don't really need to have those proprietary softwares like maybe MS Word, Excel, or so many other softwares. So this is my criteria number two. The third criteria is that we should try to optimize the usage of the disk space. I know that we don't really worry about disk space these days, but I'm basically saying this because when I started using computers in 90s, it was not really the case. I mean, disk space was not really a problem back then, but yeah, it was definitely something that we used to worry about, because it was not like these days. Like these days, we have like TBs of hard disk space available to us, and it is not really expensive. But when you're working with limited space, you do things carefully, and when you're dealing with your files, try to keep the file size minimum if you can, because your files need to be stored somewhere on a hard disk, which is fine, but you will also move them. You will eventually take backups. You will have to take backups, and if your file size is big, then it will be a problem. I mean, it is a massive pain to manage those files if they are really big. Now, this again goes back to the text format, which I will definitely talk about, maybe separately in another video or podcast. But text file is my number one preference whenever it comes to uh, saving something on the computer, I try the whole approach I take, the kind of softwares I use. I first try to think whether this can be managed maybe within a text file. And there are plenty of things that you can do these days with nothing but text files. I mean, it is something that people were using back then when I mean, I think it was probably before this internet thing became very popular. I think it was only in the last 20 years or so when these proprietary softwares, in my opinion, really picked up and people were actually dependent on them. So keeping your files lightweight without any dependence on other proprietary softwares, and if you can manage it within text files, then I think these few things can have drastic impact on your way of working and the way you interact with computers. Of course, it is not really applicable for each and everything. If you're talking about binaries, for example, if we talk about images, videos, or songs, or any other proprietary format where text file cannot be used, then of course it is fine. But as I mentioned just now, try if you can manage as much as you can to use a text format, text-based files. Now, talking about naming conventions, now this is again based on my own personal experience, and this has worked for me. And I think even by simply just managing the files with full control and by using a proper convention when I save my file, it gives me a lot of peace of mind. It may seem a bit too much work in the beginning, but when you do it over the years, when you follow these conventions over the years, you will realize, I have realized that it has made my life a lot easier. Now, starting with, of course, the usage of capital letters, I try to not use capital letters in my file names. So if I have to name my files, I try to use nothing but small. I use only small caps. So if your file name is this is a good name, all within small letter, and this actually helps because when you're like searching for, I mean, I'll tell you the reason why. When I'm searching for, let us say, a file, especially on Linux, if the file name is this is a good name, I can actually type in this, and then I can type in and I can of course do autocomplete. And if you have like some capital letters in between your file names, then you have to press maybe shift, and it can be a problem. So I prefer, I mean, it is not really a massive problem, but it slows me down when I have to press one additional key on my keyboard to search for the file names, when I'm of course doing some autocomplete, or maybe if I'm using any Linux based command to search for file names. I prefer not typing too many keys on the keyboard, and with small capital letters, it also helps me in reminding myself the purpose of the file name. And I don't really use this convention for the code always, because if you're writing code in let us say Java or maybe Groovy, for example, you have to use capital letters in between, which is fine. But as much as I can, I prefer for my images or my videos, I don't really use any capital letters. Now, talking about timestamp, this is probably the most important thing. I keep a timestamp on my files, and the timestamp is with the format YY hyphen mm hyphen dd underscore file name. Now, by just having a timestamp, I think you're making a huge difference, because although you have the file creation date and the file updation date in your file, but you want to know when this file was created, especially if you're managing your images or if you're keeping track of all the videos. For example, if I make a video today, I will save it as 2021-06-30 underscore the video name, and the format with YY hyphen mm-dd in the beginning, make sure that I can also search for the file using the file name. And if I use the file name as the sorting criteria, the files will still be sorted by the actual date. So this is amazing because you may want to modify the file later on, because when you modify the file, the sorting will probably not work based on the file creation or updation date, because it will consider the newly modified file as a new file, or at least it will be not in the list. I mean, of course, you can change these things, but if I follow this YYMMDD in the beginning, I can be assured that I can sort the files by file names only. But of course, by just looking at the file name, I know that this particular file was created, this particular video, this particular image was taken maybe on this particular date last year or 10 years ago. Now, I also prefer not to use any spaces in my file names. So starting with, of course, timestamp, then underscore file name. Now, when I have a file name, I try to replace the spaces within file name with hyphens. Now, if the file name is this is a good name, then I will name my file as 2021-06-29 or whatever date, underscore this hyphen is hyphen a hyphen good hyphen name. So this is definitely a file name that actually helps me. And using hyphens, actually, I mean, you can also probably use underscores, which I do. I also use underscores in my file name, but with the help of hyphens, I think you can quickly search for the files whenever you need to, because as I mentioned before, if you are trying to search the files with the file name, you can type in something like this is a good name, and by simply typing the keys and tab, you are actually able to find the exact file that you're looking for. And of course, when you have the timestamp as well in the very beginning, that also helps a lot in identifying your files. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about, and which I already mentioned above, is the format. Now, wherever applicable, whenever you can, try to save a file in a text-based format. It need not to be .txt. Any text-based file that you can open from anywhere, from any device, from any operating system, in any software, because when you have a text file, you can actually open it in your terminal. The good thing about text file is that you can search for it, you can search within it, you can manipulate your text files if you need to, and they are so fast. I mean, you don't have to worry about I mean, you can definitely manage your files within, let us say, a doc, MS Office doc, or maybe Excel, but you have to open them, and you have to rely on those softwares later on to update them as well. Like, you may not have MS Office after 5 years, and of course, I'm not really sure if you are paying for it or not, but let us say you're paying for it, then you have to still pay for it after 5 years or 10 years. And apart from searching, manipulating, I think the text files are definitely lightweight. I mean, these are nothing but text files, and try to use a text format where you can also convert it to the format that you need. For example, I use org mode, and in org mode, you can of course export your, like, for example, this particular document that I'm writing right now while I'm recording this video and this podcast, I can publish it as HTML on my blog. So you can convert it, and when you have a text file, if you're, let us say, using a markdown format, you can also, I mean, you can always convert text to other formats, like maybe PDF if you need to, or HTML, which is definitely handy if you want to share it. But even by just keeping the files in text format, for your own personal needs, for your own personal knowledge base, can make a huge difference in the way you interact with computers. Now, it again goes back to my original point. If you manage your files properly, and if you try to follow a convention, and if you try to follow these conventions for a long time, then your interaction with computers and the way the way you work will definitely improve. You can become more efficient, you can become quick in getting the information. And I do a lot of things. I do, in fact, plenty of things in my day. Like I talked about my daily schedule. I switch from one activity to another activity, and I rely on computer. I use computer to help me so that it can uh, it can do the work for me. I don't really use computer for. I mean, of course, I do use it for like disturbance, like not disturbance, but I should say entertainment. I mean, I do watch movies, but if I am able to do my work quickly, if I am able to if I'm able to retrieve the work that I did maybe 5 years ago, maybe if I'm looking for, let us say I'm writing a shell script, or if I'm writing a piece of code, of course I can search online if I need any help. I can always do a quick Google search. But searching within your computer, within those text files, will be 10 times faster than what you can do online. And when you learn something, for example, if I'm learning something, I keep a note of it. Let us say if I'm learning shell scripting, I will of course have my scripts. But the way I work, I use Emacs or mode with literate programming. So within my document, within my org file, I can have pieces of code, snippets of codes that I can also run. And uh, and when I'm learning something with, of course, a lot of notes, I am actually building a knowledge. So I whenever I want, I can go back to the notes that I made maybe 6 months ago, and if I have to refresh my memory, I can do that. I know people make notes on Notepad. I do that. I of course use Notepad, but if I have to maybe learn something with the intention to, of course, come back to it after 5 months, 6 months, and maybe 6 years. If I'm making a note on the computer, it is nothing but a text file. And when you have text file, you can easily go back to your own handwritten notes. For example, if I'm learning Node.js, I can definitely read a book again. I can definitely watch those videos that I watched maybe 5 years ago. But if I'm able to compress that knowledge which I gained by watching those videos, or by reading that book, into my own notes, it is already like a very concise format. And to refresh my memory, to revise, I can just go back to my notes. And when I look at my notes, I can of course relive the moment, because I made those notes. And by reading your own notes, you are actually you're able to quickly remind yourself and relearn what you learned earlier. So in my opinion, I think these simple tips of file management, you don't have to follow each and everything the way I do it. But the reason I am making this video, this podcast, is because I think these things really worked for me, and it has helped me tremendously over the years. And overall, in general, I think I am able to use the computer to the fullest. I mean, you do have a computer. If you're watching this video, I'm hoping that you have a computer. And when you have a computer, it can actually do a lot of wonderful things for you. It can be a very old computer, like I have this 10-year-old ThinkPad. I am able to get the most out of it. I do things. I do a lot of things on my computer. Like my main work computer is this computer, and most of my files, as I mentioned, are nothing but text files with the conventions that I have been following. Or I do have like external hard disk which is attached. But if you are keeping everything within text format, then I can guarantee you that you will probably never need a lot of storage space. You can actually manage your files, your work easily on your own laptop's internal hard disk. Of course, keep a backup, but if you're able to keep everything, all the files that you have, at one place in one computer, it is also a big win in terms of all the work that you have been doing for so many years. And you may be new to computers, or maybe you are not really following these things already. totally okay. Even if you start doing these things maybe today, then after 5 years or after 10 years or after maybe 20 years, uh, if you keep on doing these things, if you keep on following these practices, then it will have a really big impact on your life. And that is all. That is all I wanted to talk about in this video, in this podcast. I will be sharing this on my podcast as well. And I hope you enjoyed watching to it, listening to it. Thank you. Thank you very much.